Hey, it's me, Nalthazar, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the Mythic chase cards that caught my eye when I was looking through the Strixhaven spoilers. So, let's get into it. Just like with my video on the masterpieces, I am going to be including both sides of any card that has Invoke, because if one side is chase-worthy, having the extra utility of the other side definitely is worth taking a look at, just at the very least to see what the other side does. Now for most of them, both sides are very good, so they are both sides that you would want to chase. The first card on my list is Awaken the Blood Avatar. This is going to be one of those Invoke cards. It's got two sides. The Invoke side is going to be Extus, Oriq, Overlord. Now, Awaken the Blood Avatar is a 22 mana spell, and when a card in play with a creature type is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, if this card's in your hand, it gains 4 mana. So basically, whenever a creature dies or loses a reinforcement, this thing's going to gain 4 mana in your hand. The ability on it is to destroy the last opposing creature and then create a Blood Avatar token. If this is not invoked, then your opponent loses 9 life. Now, the Blood Avatar token in Paper Magic is just a black-red avatar token. In Paper Magic, it's a 3/6, and it has haste, and when it attacks, it deals damage to your opponent. So my guess is that Awaken the Blood Avatar's Blood Avatar token is going to have a power toughness with a toughness greater than the power. It's going to be doing damage to your opponent every time it attacks, and it will have haste. So with this card, you'll wind up destroying a creature, you'll make a token, that token's going to have haste, and then it's going to swing over at your opponent. The reason that I like this card so much is that even though it's 22 mana, it's going to give red a source of destroying your opponent's creatures that is not targeted, and also that just destroys where you don't have to worry about damage. Furthermore, if that Blood Avatar token winds up actually being a powerful token, then you're going to be able to get a heck of a lot of value out of this. And then even more potential value comes to this from all of the different abilities that we're going to have that copy spells and gives them full mana. And then also where you're going to be able to deal damage to your opponent equal to the mana cost of the spell. So there's a lot in the set that really seems to be centered around spells and that gets, extra boosts for things that are higher mana costs. And so I see this being able to function fairly easily in current standard. To add to this, it is indeed red, and so you can pair this with Mox Ruby and then just basically cast it for free anyways. So this isn't a card that I feel like has a prohibitive mana cost for people who have larger collections. If you're a person who's newer to the game, then I see this as being probably not a very good card on its own, just because the 22 mana is going to be just an incredibly excessive cost. So yeah, but this is a very big chase card for me personally, especially because of how much I play Koth. The flip side is Extus, and Extus is just absolutely ridiculous. This card is insane. This is definitely one of my bigger chase cards in the set. So this is 12 mana for a 5/7 with double strike, Magecraft, and as we know, Invoke. The Magecraft is just going to make it so that anytime you cast a spell, you trigger Magecraft. You can trigger it up to twice per turn. And then when you trigger that Magecraft, then you're going to return the first non-legendary creature from your graveyard to your hand, and then give that the Evergreen of Double Strike. Then, if this thing's not invoked, that creature is going to gain Menace and half of its mana. So this is just such a strong card. There's just so much value on this card. This is maybe the best black creature they've ever made, from just the looks of it. I mean, it does so much for so little. It's only 12 mana. It's hitting for 10 because of the double strike. And with the Magecraft, you're going to be bringing back your creatures from the graveyard, which are really easy to dump in there with a bunch of the black walkers, be it the new Professor Onyx, or you're using one of the Lilianas that either dumps into the grave or it makes you discard, whatever it may be, you're going to have a lot of outlets to get creatures into your graveyard, and then Extus is going to be able to just bring them back and give them double strike, and if you actually have this card and you don't invoke it, then when you bring them back, they get half their mana. This card, I think, is going to be insanely good. I see this being just disgustingly powerful, so I cannot wait to get this one. This is one that I will be targeting with my pinkies even, because I very much want this card. Next on the list is Baleful Mastery. This is going to be the first of our spells that has the new enhanced mechanic. It costs 5 mana, and then when you cast it, you exile target opposing creature. If you can't, exile an opposing Vanguard support, then your opponent loses X life, where X is that card's base mana cost. Now, if this card was enhanced 2 or fewer times, then your opponent is also going to draw a card, and that card will gain half of its mana. So the way that this will work is as soon as this card enters your hand from anywhere, 6 gems on the battlefield are going to become enhanced. And so you'll see that this little symbol right here has a 6, so 6 of them are going to be enhanced. And then as you make your matches, if you match at least 2 of those gems, then you don't have to, 3 of those gems, because it's 2 or less times, then your opponent's not going to draw the card and give it half mana. But either way, even if you're giving your opponent a card with half mana in order to exile your target opposing creature and then make your opponent lose life, where it's based on the creature's mana cost, for only 5 mana, that's definitely a worthwhile proposition. Now, would I use this card over something like Mythos of Nethroi? Probably not. Would I use this over Hagra Mauling? Probably not. But not everyone has those cards. So this still seems like a really powerful card in that it's also going to be able to ping your opponent for damage, and it's going to be exiling their creatures. So I like this, but this definitely isn't something that I'm personally going to be going out of my way to get my hands on. I know that I'll eventually get it because of VIP, but it's still a really good card to keep your eye on, especially at only 5 mana. The next one is Beledros Witherbloom. So you're actually going to see all of the Elder Dragons on this list. The Elder Dragons in this set are just absolutely ridiculous. They are all such good cards. And so from the patch notes, it showed the white-red dragon with the new exclusive tag. So I'm thinking that the Elder Dragons are likely going to be the exclusives for this set. In the event that they are not, then these are going to be my other primary chase cards for the set. So Beledros is a 7/7 for 21. It's green and black. At the beginning of each player's turn, create a pest token. So that means at the beginning of your opponent's turn and your turn, meaning you're going to be getting 2 pests for every one of your turns. And then at the end of your turn, you may pay 15 life to convert 15 gems to black or green. Now, if you have, say, Shadow Spear in your deck, or really just anything that's going to make it so that you can gain consistent life, then you're just going to be able to use this ability every turn, and then the paying 15 life to convert 15 gems is going to mean nothing. And then you're just going to be able to ramp like crazy. This dragon seems very strong. It's not the strongest of the dragons, but nonetheless, it's still a very good card that I very much want to get my hands on. Body of Research. This card I find fascinating. I think it'll be very strong, but we'll have to play with it, and then we'll see if it's as strong as it looks. So this is 18 mana. It is a blue-green spell, and you're going to create a fractal token. If you do not remember what fractal tokens do, if we take a look at our pre-release notes, the fractal tokens are going to be these blue-green supports. They've got 2 shields. They're resilient. And when the support loses shields for the first time on your turn, reinforce it. When the support is reinforced, its level increases by 1. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, your first creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is this support's level. The part that we want to focus on is that the first creature you control at the beginning of your combat gets +X until end of turn, where X is the support's level. So when we look at this, you create the fractal token, then increase its level by X, where X is the total number of non-token, non-copy cards in your hand, your graveyard, exile, and in play under your control. Now, this is absolutely ridiculous because it doesn't specify different cards. It's just the total number of cards. So if you're dumping a whole bunch of cards in your graveyard, like even if you just have like 100 cards in your graveyard, then that alone is going to make this fractal token have 100 levels and is going to give your first creature 100 power. And there are just so many ways of dumping things in your graveyard, or just like throwing things into your exile, or, just you are going to probably with blue-green have a hand of 6 cards, and you're probably going to have other things out on the battlefield too. So I just see this as being a potential, like, first creature pump of somewhere in the 20 to 200 range, and then you just smash your opponent in horrible, horrible ways. So this card, if the fractal tokens wind up being, like, in any way decent, is actually going to be really, really strong. I actually think that the cards that produce the fractal tokens are kind of terrifying, especially just because of how much damage they're going to be able to help you put out. And if you think of this in, like, even a Nissa Worldwaker deck, who I think is going to, once again, be a god tier planeswalker, then those little hasty elemental tokens, like, just if you think of Greg using something like this, and even if Greg only gets this thing to, like, 20 power, or level 20, like, then when those little elemental tokens come out, they're going to be swinging for plus 20 or more per turn. So it's just going to make it really hard to beat Nissa with in Greg's hands. So I think that Body of Research is going to be a just sickeningly powerful card. I don't know that I'll use it in events unless we have to have like fractal tokens for events. So if they spoil the new events and they require the use of fractal tokens, maybe you use this. But otherwise, I just see it as you just make a creature way too strong. Like, it's just like an auto win button. Next on the list is Dragonsguard Elite. So this is another one of those cards that just looks really cool to me, and it'll either wind up just being like okay, or it'll wind up being insanely broken. So this is 14 mana for a 5/5. It has Magecraft of 3, so the first 3 spells that you play on your turn, or on any turn, are going to give this creature a permanent +2/+2 buff. And then when you activate a loyalty ability, this creature gets double its buff value in power toughness, basically. So it's going to get +X/+X, where X is equal to this creature's buff value. So let's say that this creature has been buffed 3 times from Magecraft, so it's got the +6/+6. You use your first ability, it gets +6/+6, but that +6/+6 that it gains is a buff. So then the next time you use your loyalty ability, now it's going to be getting +12/+12. And then the next time you use the loyalty ability, it's going to be getting +24/+24. So like this thing just doubles and doubles and doubles and doubles. And if you think of this card in, say, I know I'm saying her a lot, but you think of her in Nissa Worldwaker, who's going to be able to spam her first ability like crazy, or with Karn, I mean, this card could potentially be massively terrifying with under Greg's hands. Like, like Greg has this thing, it's very easy to buff your creatures, and then now every time Greg spams an ability, this thing's power just shoots out of the roof. So this could be a really fun card to play with, and a really terrifying card to play against. I'm very excited for what green is going to look like, but also quite a bit scared of what green is going to look like, if I'm being totally honest. The next card is Efreet Flamepainter. So this is 14 mana for a 4/7 with Berserker, Double Strike, and Bravery. Ooh, it took me a second to get Bravery. I wanted to say Rally again, but I know it's not Rally. I don't know why I keep thinking Rally. Maybe it's because if you got like a banner like that and you put it in the ground, it's like you're trying to rally the troops, but whatever. It's Bravery. So 4/7 with Double Strike at 14 mana is already a solid creature. And then if that wasn't enough, it also has when this creature deals combat damage to your opponent's planeswalker, pick one of the first 3 spell cards from your graveyard, create a copy of that spell in your hand, and give it full mana. Then exile that spell from your graveyard. So this is when it deals combat damage. And since it has Double Strike, it's going to be dealing combat damage twice per attack. So you're going to be taking up to 2 spells from your graveyard and putting them back in your hand. Like, if you think about this card in, say, a Rawl deck, right? Rawl's first ability, which I think is only like 6 loyalty, you pick one of the first 4 cards and dump the other 3 in your graveyard, you're just going to be able to spam that ability, dump a whole bunch of spells in your graveyard, and then have this thing just get them all back. And then, once you've got a bunch of spells in your graveyard, it's not like your opponent's going to really easily be able to get anything out that's going to be able to stay on the battlefield, especially if you've got an established collection of nasty spells. And there's just so many good spells in red right now that I see this card being absolutely phenomenal. I see it being a card that I would even use a lot in events because it has quite a lot of power. It gets rid of your opponent's creatures. and it's going to give you free spells back from your graveyard, which is going to enable you to achieve a whole load of objectives just by being able to cast a whole bunch of spells and get the extra effects from the spells. So this just really seems like a very flexible card, not because it's a ballerina thingy or whatever it is, I don't know. But nonetheless, it's still like absolutely crazy good. So this is another one that I'm definitely going to want to get my hands on. Next up is going to be Galazeth Prismari. So this is going to be the blue-red Elder Dragon. So once again, I am expecting that this is going to be an exclusive. If it's not, praise hallelujah, but you know, I do think it will be. So this one's 15 mana, it's a 6/7, and at the beginning of each player's turn, create a gold token. So during your opponent's, beginning of your opponent's turn, beginning of your turn, create a gold token, get 2 gold tokens for each one of your turns. And then when this creature attacks, the first spell card in your hand gains 2 mana for each artifact you control. So this card is pretty terrifying on a lot of levels for what it's going to be able to do for the spells in your hand, because you're going to be creating all these gold tokens, and if your opponent destroys the gold tokens, then you get mana right away. If your opponent doesn't destroy the gold tokens, then you're going to get mana whenever you attack to your spells. So the whole theme of the blue-red school is just like dumping and dumping and dumping and dumping spells, as you may have noticed from the previous card. But nonetheless, this is going to make it so that you're going to be able to just like go completely ham in casting spells. So, and on top of that, not only are you going to be casting a whole bunch of spells, but then you're also just going to be filling your hand with mana because you're going to be making all these gold tokens. And so as cascades happen or whatever, you're just going to be filling up with mana. So I think it's really cool to see this kind of card in red-blue that's going to be giving you a whole bunch of mana with the gold tokens. So yeah, I think this one's going to be quite strong. The only thing that I have against this creature is that it is red and it has this ability from when it attacks based on artifacts, and it doesn't have haste. But if we ignore that, then I think this is going to be a very powerful card. Next one up is Harness Infinity. This card maybe would be on my list just for the art, but the ability is quite cool too. So this is a 16 mana spell. It is black and green. Then each of the first 6 different cards without buried in your graveyard are going to gain buried X, where X is that card's base mana cost. Then you discard your hand, and for each card discarded this way, each card in your graveyard with buried is going to gain 3 mana. Then you exile Harness Infinity. So this is going to be pretty nasty, because if you're playing a deck of cards that are, if you will, 18 mana or less, then you can effectively discard a hand of 6 in order to be able to autocast the first 6 different cards in your graveyard, as they're all going to gain buried, and then you're going to be able to give them full mana. So if you were to run this in, Liliana, I want to say it's Death's Majesty. I'll correct myself in probably like 15 seconds as I go, because it'll strike me like a bolt of lightning. But there's just too many Lilianas, I'm really glad that Professor Onyx is called Professor Onyx instead of another Liliana, because, it just makes it easier to remember her name instead of all the other different Lilianas that we have. But anywho, so discarding your hand really isn't too bad, especially if you've got some way of, drawing a whole bunch of extra cards. And if at the very least some of the cards that you're dumping into your graveyard or casting are going to give you more cards back, then this is just going to be a pretty big win anyways. If you've got Graveyard Recursion, that's once again even more of a win. And so I feel like you can really go ahead and try and make some kind of really cool thing happen with this. Liliana Untouched by Death. Untouched by Death is the one I'm thinking of. That's the good one. That's the one where you dump 8 cards into your graveyard for your first ability. So yeah, Harness Infinity seems more like a cool card, not a necessary card, but I think it's going to have quite a lot of power. Next up is Ingenius Mastery. This is going to be a 6 mana spell, draw up to 4 cards. Those cards gain 2 mana for each of this card's enhancements. Then, if this card was enhanced 2 or fewer times, create 2 gold tokens under your opponent's control, and your opponent draws up to 2 cards. So, I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to play with or play against a card called Blue Sun's Zenith. But Blue Sun's Zenith was a blue spell that had stored mana, and then you would draw cards, and they would all get a whole bunch of mana. Well, this card reminds me quite a lot of Blue Sun Zenith. It definitely isn't quite as strong as Blue Sun. Blue Sun had no drawback and would draw you 6 cards and give them mana, Whereas this one's only going to be drawing you 4 cards, and there's a potential drawback. But the gain is that they get 2 mana for each of this card's enhancements. And so this thing can be enhanced up to 6 times, as when it enters, your hand from anywhere, it's going to put 6 of these enhancement gems down, which also means that that's going to be the maximum number of times that the card can be enhanced. But nonetheless, since it gets 2 mana for each of the enhancements, and you can get 6 of them, that's 6 times 2 for 12, so you're going to be able to draw up to 4 cards and give each of those cards 12 mana, which for a 6 mana spell is rather phenomenal. So I see this as being a very strong card. I am very excited to play with this one, and if your opponent already has a full hand, giving them the gold tokens really isn't too big of a drawback. Obviously, if they are out of cards in their hand, you probably don't want them to draw cards. Or heck, maybe you're a person like me that's an absolute savage, and you're going to be playing with Nicol Bolas the Ravager. You're going to get your 3rd ability down on the flip side where your opponent can't draw cards, and then you're going to play this and laugh at your opponent as they really get nothing out of you just spamming the heck out of this for 6 mana. So this is a phenomenal card. I definitely want this one. Next up is going to be Jadzi, Oracle of Arcavios. I'm probably saying all of that wrong, and I apologize to everyone that I've offended for saying that so horribly wrongly, but whatever. This is a 21 mana 8/8. It's going to have Invoke. It's got Ward, which is one of our new mechanics, and it has Magecraft, another one of our new mechanics. So kind of cool. It's got 3 of the new mechanics on 1 card. So 8/8 for 21. Ward, drain 8 mana from hand. So that's basically, on your opponent's turn, after they make their first match, if they have a spell card with full mana in their hand, they may choose to drain 8 mana from their hand in order to not give Jadzi hexproof. If they do not drain the 8 mana from their hand, Jadzi gains hexproof until end of turn. This card is also going to have Magecraft 3, so you play for the first 3 spells you play in a turn, draw a card, then you may drain 5 mana from your hand, and if you do, that card gains full mana. And then finally, the ability that stands out the most to me is then, if it's not invoked, when an effect you control drains mana from your opponent's hand, gain 7 mana. Now, we have a heck of a lot of cards that drain mana from our opponent's hands, and I'm not thinking of just things like Sphinx's Tutelage that's going to make it so that cards become more expensive. I'm thinking more of just cards that are going to drain mana from our opponent's hands. And yes, we do have quite a lot of those. And so if you were to pair this with, something that's going to be draining mana even every few turns, or like multiple times in a turn or whatever, you're going to be able to do some absolutely horrible, horrible things to your opponent with this card. Even if you just think of like Mizium Meddler from Origins, which is going to make it so that whenever you match any color gem, drain 1 mana from your opponent, that's going to make it so that every time you make any gem match, then you drain the mana from your opponent, but you gain 7 mana for every gem match, like on top of your mana gains. So there's just a lot of fun synergy stuff you can do with this. I don't see this being a super overpowered card by any means. It's definitely not a card that I'm going to be targeting with pinkies, but it's a card that I very much want to play with and sort of, abuse in some kind of silly fun deck for about a week and then put back on the shelf. So the flip side, the invoke side, is Journey to the Oracle. This card is really only here because of Jadzi. I don't actually particularly feel strongly about Journey to the Oracle. So with this one, you move all land supports from your hand into play. Then if you control a land support with 10 or more shields, you return this card to your hand. Paying 13 mana to move all the land supports from your hand into play just doesn't seem like a particularly great ability, especially when we have Escape to the Wilds, which is 15 mana, draws 5 cards, and then we'll put all of the lands from your hand into play. So, that just seems better. It costs 2 more mana, but you draw up to 5 cards for doing so. So, yeah, and it's also green and red. So, yeah, I like that one way more. And then this one has, if it's not invoked, you're also going to gain X loyalty, where X is your highest mana bonus. But in green, most green planeswalkers don't have any singularly massive mana bonus, just because green has so much gem conversion that they seem to be avoiding giving us green planeswalkers with very large mana bonuses, which, I definitely understand. But that means that you're going to be gaining up to 5 loyalty for using this, which is cool, but I'd still rather use Escape to the Wilds. Next up is Mavinda, Student's Advocate. So this is 12 mana for a 5/6. It's got flying, At the beginning of your turn, you may pick one of the first 4 spells from your graveyard and give that card Flashback and Buried. Now, it's going to get Flashback and Buried X, where X is that card's base mana cost times 2. If it's an aura, it will gain full mana instead. Now, I know that I wound up reading it in a way that's different from the text on the card, but I feel like the way that I read it out is a little bit easier to understand. So basically, it gains Flashback and Buried X, where X is that card's base mana cost times 2, unless it's an aura. If it's an aura, it gains full mana. So what I like about this one is that at the beginning of your turn, every turn, you can just basically take an aura from your graveyard and then just give it full mana and cast it on something. And as we established in the Masterpiece video for white, there's a lot of really good white auras, and you could throw this in, a multicolor deck and use auras other than things like Staggering Insight and Chromantic Core, or Ghostblade Eidolon, or. There's a very long list of very good white auras. So this card seems really good for players pretty much regardless of what their collection is. And then you can make a really cool aura deck with it. Do I think it's overpowered? No. Do I think it's something that you absolutely need to have in your collection? No. Is it something that I think that you'll be able to get a lot of power out of and have a lot of fun with? Yes. So that's why it made the cut. It just sort of stood out as like a pretty cool card that didn't cost too much mana for what it does. Next up is Shadrix Silverquill. This is going to be the black-white Elder Dragon. This is 16 mana for a 5/8 with double strike and flying. At the beginning of your turn, create up to 2 enhanced gems, and when this creature attacks, perform one or more of the following effects according to the number of enhanced gems. If there are 2 enhanced gems on the board, or just 2 or 3, I'm guessing, you're going to create an Inkling token. If there are 4 or 5, then your creatures get +1/+1. And then if there are 6 or more, you're going to gain all the previous ones also, and you're going to draw a card and give it half its mana. So I see enhanced gems as being something that are going to be really easy to get out. And then this thing makes enhanced gems on its own. So I imagine that this is just going to make it so that you've basically got a 5/8 flying double strike with when this creature attacks, create an Inkling token, give all your creatures +1/+1, and draw a card and give it half of its mana. The big weakness of both white and black is that they have a hard time drawing cards. And this is going to make it so that they're both going to be able to draw cards every turn and give them half mana. And if that wasn't enough, this thing is a 5/8 double strike on its own that's going to buff itself up and is 16 mana, which is very reasonable for that. This is 16 mana for a creature that's going to be hitting for 10. And then after that is going to be making itself hit for more than that every single turn. Shadrix is disgusting. Like, the black creatures that we're getting in this set are just absolutely nasty. Like I've mentioned in a few other videos in the past, that the weakness of black, as you look at black like throughout all of Puzzle Quest, is that black just didn't have really any good creatures for the most part. Like, not really, like just about none. I mean, there are a few that are like, oh yeah, this creature's kind of cool, it's kind of good, but it doesn't compare to the creatures of the other colors. And so with this set, what's really cool is we're getting a few of them that absolutely compare to creatures in like some of the legacy creatures that are just really, really nasty. So this is a very good card. I like it very much. Next up is Tanazir Quandrix. This is one of my favorite cards in the set, just hands down. I read this card's text and just started laughing. To be fair, I read it after the blue support that makes it so that spells don't happen anymore. You'll see that one in my rare video, guaranteed. But nonetheless, this is just disgusting. Like, why does this exist? I mean, really, guys? I love tokens as much as the next guy, gal, or non-binary pal, but like, why is... anyways, this thing's 20 mana for a 7/7. It's got flying, it's got trample, it's got bravery, which is actually very good. It is very good that this thing has bravery. And then it has, when this creature enters the battlefield, double all buff values of target creature you control. So it's kind of like Ronos in that way, in that it's going to be doubling power, but it's going to be doubling buff values. So that's important. It's not like just like Ronos, where Ronos is like, I'm just going to double your power. Like you have to have some kind of buff down in order to get something from this. But nonetheless, this thing is still blue, and so you can still play it with something like Thassa, and it is still green. So you can play it in, I don't know, Garruk and fetch this blasted bugger every single turn. There's going to be a lot of ways to get this thing out and make that double thing happen a lot. But the double thing is not even what makes this card strong, which is kind of surprising because that's a really strong ability. But like even if it didn't have that ability, this card would be just completely cracked. So when this creature attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of other creatures you control become equal to this creature's power and toughness until end of turn. I'm sure you can hear the smile in my voice as I'm saying this, because this why? Like, come on. I mean, if you're playing this with, say, once again, I know, surprise, surprise, Nissa Worldwaker, and, I don't know, Phylath, right? You play things like Turn Timber Symbiosis to be able to just spam your critters out. You get Prismatic Bridge, so that you're basically going to guarantee that you're going to get both of these things down. This thing has Bravery, so it's going to be attacking, and it's guaranteed going to make it so that your elemental tokens are going to get this thing's power toughness as their base power toughness. Like, basically, you just... Oh my gosh, you're gonna wreck so hard. I mean, getting like even 10 tokens with Nissa Worldwaker is nothing. Like, at all, just nothing. Getting 15 tokens is easy peasy lemon squeezy. If you've got 15 tokens in this thing out, those 15 tokens are going to be hitting for 105 damage. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, just this thing and Nissa Worldwaker's first ability is an amazing deck right there. Think about that. Like, you have basically nothing but this and Nissa's first ability, and you're just going to be completely stomping on people. So, yes, this card is disgusting. This is the card that I most want to play with from the set, I think, maybe. Like, of all the cards in the set, I absolutely love this thing. I love it so much. And I am sure that I'm going to hate the heck out of this thing when I go up against it for the first time in a Worldwaker deck. If you were thinking to yourself, oh man, eventually Leafkin Avenger's going to leave Standard, and then everything's going to be fine with the world. No, this thing's going to exist too. And then, oh gosh, oof, Greg with Nissa Worldwaker is going to be terrifying. Just, you heard it here. Greg is going to be terrifying with Nissa Worldwaker. Next one up is Velomachus Lorehold. So this is going to be the white-red Elder Dragon. It's 18 mana for an 8/8 with flying, haste, and vigilance. And when this creature attacks, pick one of the first 4 different spell cards from your library, fetch that card, it gains X mana. X is equal to this creature's power. Oh my gosh. This, again, is just disgusting levels of power for Standard or Legacy, because you put this thing in a deck with Hazoret's Undying Fury and deploy the Gatewatch, and you just guaranteed fetch Hazoret's Undying Fury effectively every single turn, and play then 4 deploy the Gatewatches every single turn, because getting this thing to 21 power is going to be like no difficult task with the combination of those 2 cards in deck. So you could put this thing in a Calamity deck that just does the worst things in the world to your opponent in Legacy. And if we just think of Standard, like, forget Legacy for a moment, right? Because Legacy, there aren't that many events that are Legacy, but even in Standard, just that every single turn, you're basically just going to be able to pick just about any spell in your deck. You just go, you know what spell do I want right now with full mana? Do I want Ruinous Ultimatum? Yeah, I kind of do. You know what? Let's just go ahead and get that. Because, I mean, let's face it, both white and red have very easy ways to buff their creatures. I mean, if you're running like Koth, Koth is second ability, Koth's third ability. Either way, you're going to be able to buff this thing and get a whole bunch of power into it, which is going to get you spells for free. I mean, in the white planeswalkers, I mean, most of them have some way to buff a creature you control. So, I mean, you throw this thing in and you buff this thing, and then you're just getting free spells out the wazoo. This thing is crazy strong. So, as the dragons go, like, if I had to, like, rank them in terms of power, I think that the blue-green one is the strongest, just because Nissa Worldwaker exists. But then after her, I think it's a fairly reasonable, like, I think it's a fairly reasonable leap to say that this is probably the second most powerful of the dragons after that. I mean, just getting the spells every turn and probably full mana. And this thing has haste, so it comes down, you're just getting free spells. Like, you just get immediate value town from this thing. And it's only 18 mana, which is also super value. And it also has vigilance, so if it can, it's going to block and kill. It's a really good card. You want this. Believe me, you want this. The last card in the Mythic list is Verdant Mastery. So, This is an 11 mana spell. You're going to fetch the first 3 different land supports from your library and convert X gems to green, where X is equal to the highest base mana cost of a land card in your hand. So, I mean, let's say that you've got, I don't know, like a land that costs 14 mana in your deck, right? Or even if you're just using something that has a mana cost of 12. Like, let's just say for a moment that you're just using the Kaldheim Common land as your highest mana cost land, right? That's 12 mana. Then this is going to fetch 3 different lands, and then it's going to convert 12 gems to green. So right there, that's actually a really phenomenal card for 11 mana. But then it has the whole enhanced with a negative thing. So if this card was enhanced 2 or fewer times, copy up to 2 of those cards into your opponent's hand, and those copies gain full mana. So I don't like that you're giving your opponent a whole bunch of potential gem conversion with this, that they're going to get every single turn, because even if they aren't playing your colors, then you're going to be making the, like, so the lands that you get are going to be making specific gem conversions, right? So let's say that you're playing a green deck, you're converting gems to green, and then you give your opponent green gem converters also. Then when your opponent's green gem converters convert gems, then they're going to be significantly more likely to convert into green, which is going to start cascades, which is going to make horrible, horrible things happen. You might be like, Nalthazar, why is this on your chase list if you're talking about how this thing could go so horribly wrong? Well, this is one of those instances where you're going to definitely, probably, great job, Dingus Khan, whatever. You're definitely going to want to make sure that you are enhancing this 3 or more times. So this one's on here because if enhancing things is really easy, especially with, like, if gem conversion and the landfall from gem conversion that breaks enhanced gems counts as enhancing spells, then this is a card that's going to be disgusting levels of strong. But if enhancing is difficult, then this is going to be a really bad card. So it really just depends on how good enhance is. So because of the potential ceiling for this card and how powerful it could be, that's why it's on this list. So that's it for my mythics. If there's a mythic that I did not put on this list and you're like, this is a card that I'm really excited about, why isn't it on the list? Go ahead and put that in the comments. I'd love to hear some of the ones that you are all looking at. And if you've maybe seen something that I haven't, I always love to hear other people's ideas so I can try out more things for myself. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.